Hey addicts, welcome back. We're here for another book review. This time we're going to be talking about Patchwork Cerberus. This is a relatively new light novel. It's been kind of labeled as a shonen type story that is kind of similar to like Sword Art Online and a few others that were listed in the description of like when I saw it. This is, I think, done by an author that originally came up with the story, put it on like online on like his personal website, and then just recently in like the last like year or so got it published, at least like the first part of the story. So with that being said, we're gonna talk a little bit about it. I'm gonna just again read the description online for time's sake, and then we'll dive in a little bit more and talk about the book, both good and bad. So the description reads, a terrible weapon was stolen on the floating continent of Shooting Star. It was invincible to attacks and held the power to shake a nation. A special team was called in to deal with the incident. They looked like average teenagers on the outside, but within their right eyes housed a secret that defied the laws of reality, a light. What powers do they have? How will they use it to defeat a machine of legend? And most of all, how will the new recruit fare in a battlefield of bullets and blood? Now, just from that description, sounds pretty cool. That's at least what I thought when I read it. To kind of sum it up just a little bit more from that, the weapon is kind of like a Metal Gear. It can basically destroy or it has the potential to destroy the world as they know it. There's a country that hires in this ragtag team. And there is a bit of world building in this book, but it doesn't go into, a great detail about, setting up the world. I think there's maybe a small chapter or part of a chapter that talks about the event that happened that causes, these powers to observe. So to kind of give it to you very shortly, I don't want to like call it out, but it's kind of sounds like, what would happen in like a Nazi experiment. There was people that got a hold of all of these children trying to create some sort of weapon, and only like 100 or so survived. And they call this like awakening or like the power a second eye, but then each individual person's power is like considered a light, as you can see from the description I read. And so the main story, or at least I guess just to say the main focus or the main team that is the protagonist of this, is a group of 3 characters. Alicia, who is the new recruit, she is technically the main character for this volume. She's not the main character for the series, as I've basically researched. Apparently, like this series, it focuses at least on these 3 characters, but it'll alternate for the main perspective throughout each of the volumes. So for instance, in this volume, Alicia is the center focus, or I guess gets the most shine in this book, but we also get the other characters told from their perspective, or seeing what they're doing in the volume as well. Like for instance, the other parts of the team, the leader, his name is Axon. He's a really cool dude, probably like the coolest one out of the 3. We actually opened up the story with him. We also have Harris, who is kind of like the support group of the whole team. Like I said, the world building is not like super in your face, but it does give these little things, just the information you need to know. For instance, the thing that makes these characters right off the get-go let them be unique in a way is, I guess the world is divided into different factions, or they're not really races, so I would say factions is like a better term for them. But you have comets, engineers, and meteors. Or I'm sorry, comets, starlings, and meteors. I almost had it there. So the comets, that's basically what Alicia is. I guess you could call them, they're kind of noble assassins. They're kind of, stealthy, quick on their feet, but they're also like the most caring out of all of the other factions, more compassionate. The starlings, they're like the engineers, they're the ones that do all the tech. That's what Harris is. So, they focus on weapons, mechs, suits, stuff like that. You also have Axon, like I said, that is the meteor. Meteors are pretty simple. They're just warrior people that, you know, they don't really give a shit about anybody except for themselves and having a good fight. So that leads to, you know, setting up to, you know, have that action. I guess going into more of, you know, like a good and bad take on it. This is a book that from the author, this is like, I guess, his first self-published or his first published book. I'm assuming this is also the first book he's written as well. So with that being said, there is some, just, you know, if you're talking about writing in general, just like how an author goes about like describing the story or telling the story, that kind of stuff, some of it is a bit hit or miss. For instance, the characters, they are really well written. I feel like the dialogue and like the personality he gives each of the characters is not only well written, but it's also, you know, it's just fun and entertaining to read. You know, he does a good job of making, you know, abilities that are interesting and I would say even unique to a certain degree. There's also some, again, like I said, he does a really good job with the characters, and part of that is because of the dialogue, and he does have instances of comedy, and even though this is, I would say, more of an action novel and series, he does have good comedy spread in there. Some of the bad, though, is like the world building, like I said, to a certain degree, it gives you, you know, just what you need to know, and it's perfect, you know, done deal. It's good, just like that. There's other parts of the world building, for instance, probably the one in this instance I will use is the overarching villains. Some of the overarching villains that are kind of spread in there, introduced, are just like, they're not really necessary, so part of that is kind of boring or tedious. It's not to say it's bad by any means, in terms of like, you know, introducing those overarching villains in the beginning part of your story. But I think what really makes it a detriment or a negative in this case is because of just the author's way of writing, you know, because it's kind of hard to explain, but you know, if you pick up a book from like maybe your favorite author or something, a lot of times people like authors for how they depict scenes, you know, how they can describe things, like what's going on, how this character's feeling. And this author does struggle a bit in describing scenes where there's something going on or explaining certain things. So to give you, you know, a better way of describing it is by example, right? So, for instance, Alicia, she has this device that she uses to attack people, or, you know, or fight against people. And for the longest time, I didn't know how it really worked because he didn't explain what it was or what it did. So it wasn't until like 2/3 of the book that it actually has a section where it kind of explains the technology she's using. And it's like, oh, after that, like that's really cool. So there's just like that where you'll be a little bit lost, I think, at times. Now, you know, maybe on a second read, it becomes more enjoyable, becomes more clear, you know, because you already know some of the things. But on the first read, it was very hard at some aspects of like trying to figure out what exactly he was trying to get across, or, you know, what they're doing. And some of that goes even for like the machine that they fight. Some of the way it's described, I'm like, okay, I thought it looked like this, but then they described it a different way, or at least it comes across as that. Also, what I found out is that this is not the first entry in this series. It is volume 1, but there is a prequel novel that sets up the events to volume 1. And I think some things are maybe, I haven't read the prequel yet. I do plan on doing that eventually and talking about it on the channel. But right now, I would say it's good. It stands by itself. It's a good volume. But the prequel might help balance out some of the negatives I've had. But then again, you know, if you're looking at it just from this volume, it doesn't do a good job doing that by itself. You know, looking at it as a series, some of those negatives might be taken out if we were to read the prequel first. So that would be my you know, hint to you, or I guess suggestion to you, is maybe check out the prequel first and then read this. I really wanted to do the prequel first before talking about this one, but I just hadn't had the time recently, and it's been months since I've read this now, so I just wanted to talk about this one so we could have it out there, and then eventually go back. But yeah, so there's a lot of things that I find really interesting in the book. It definitely caught my attention. I definitely wasn't disappointed overall. Because I mean, if you're looking right here in the information, I'll read it for you since you can't really make it out. But it's a very cheap book. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free. If you just want to buy it on Kindle with, not having any discounts or anything, it's $2.99. Like, for that price, it was a steal. I thought, it's granted not a long book, it's 174 pages, which is great for somebody like me that reads slow, like I always talk about. So, if you're looking for like an actual novel that won't take long at all, or if you're like Michael, as people know on the channel, he reads like a madman, so you can read this in like one sitting probably. So, given with the price, it's a really good deal, and I would say it's definitely worth checking out for that. I mean, shoot, granted it only has one rating on Amazon, but it's 5 out of 5 stars, so, take that as you will too from some random guy on the internet. But for me personally, I would say it's, through all of its flaws, I would probably be a little bit more hard on something else for, being a little rough around the edges, especially for a book, because that's kind of half the job, is making something that's coherent to read. But really, I think it's more of a testament to just see, how it has that, and it still was able to drag my attention and cause me to finish it. So for that, I'll be giving it a worth it. And I think it deserves that. I really am curious to see where the series goes. I think this volume came out a while ago, so I don't know if the author is even still developing the series. I haven't been able to find any information about it. But like I said, both the prequel and the first volume are on Amazon and Kindle and all that other stuff, so you can go check it out if you think it sounds interesting. I personally like a lot of shonen stuff, but I think people that don't like shonen would still like this. I think the two big factors is, do you like sci-fi, and are you okay, or do you like ensemble casts? Because like I said, it does switch around a lot between the different characters. So if you're somebody that, and I guess it depends on if you like all of the characters too. I would say it does a good job of that, so I wouldn't really worry about it in that sense. But, if you're just okay with just seeing a group of characters and their story being told, then I think it's definitely worth it, even if you're not a fan of shonen. But with that being said, I thought there was some cool twists in there. The powers are kind of interesting as well, and how they manipulate the world and give power boosts and stuff. I think it's, not something that's super generic and something we see all the time, or maybe it is to a certain degree, but the way it's executed in the story, it works a lot better than in some other run-of-the-mill stuff I've seen. But with that being said, guys, this is already a pretty long video, so I'm going to shut up. And if it's interesting, if you found this helpful, let me know. If you've read this actually, or if you've read the whole series or farther than I have, I'd like to know what you think of the whole series, because like I said, I've only read this one volume as of now. But anyway, guys, that'll conclude this, and be sure to check out other stuff. We got a lot of other movies, TV, video game, comics, manga, you name it, reviews out there and discussions coming. So have a good day. Peace, addicts.